unSILOed podcast is produced by University FM, elevating the stories of your institution.
Welcome to unSILOed. This is Greg LeBlanc, and I'm here today with Guy Kawasaki, who is, I guess, Chief Evangelist for Canva. Right? I think that's your official position. And of course, that way back, you were Chief Evangelist for the Macintosh, and along the way, you did some venture capital stuff. But I think you're probably best known as a writer, a speaker, and a podcaster. And I've got a couple of your books here, which is only a subset because I think you've written, I've lost track of how many books, but the most recent ones are these two, which I think are very complimentary. One is called Think Remarkable, which is sort of an account of your, I guess it's kind of like why you pick the guests you have on your show. And I'm about to ask you about that. But also this one, Wiser Guy, which is an updated version of Wise Guy, the old autobiography. And then, of course, Enchantment, which is a classic. I mean, this one is the Bible in many ways. And then we've got Art of the Start. We've got Rules for Revolutionaries. I think you can tell that I've been reading your books for a long time.
You got more of my books than I do.
Yeah. And I remember when you came to Berkeley a couple years back, and you gave this fantastic talk about pitching, and it was really made an impression on me. So welcome, Guy.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, there was a quote, I think, in one of the books from Oliver Wendell Holmes, and it said, people get famous for doing other things, right? They get famous not from trying to become famous. Now, I think there's probably a lot of people out there that would disagree, and there's people who are in the business of making themselves famous. But, you've become famous, I think, primarily just because of your writing, and your writing has evolved over the years from writing about companies and how to succeed in business to kind of how to succeed as a person. You write more about what it means to be a good human. And I'm wondering, is that transition sort of organic? Is that the kind of transition that everybody makes as a writer? Or is this something that you found happening sort of accidentally?
Well, my theory is that one's life is divided into three parts. So part one is where you're learning. So you're in school, you're interns, you're doing stuff like that. The second phase of your life is where you're earning. So now you take your education and your internship and you make money. And then the last stage is when you are returning. And that's the stage that I'm in. So, my books are getting less and less about companies and, management and entrepreneurship, and more about personal values and taking the high road. That's where I differ from many successful people in Silicon Valley, let me just say.
Yeah, but there are these deep similarities, right? So if you think about, the book Enchantment, right? I mean, in a way, it's about trying to get people to, buy your product or your service. But the way I read it was about how to get people to kind of buy you, like buy into you as a person.
Well, I mean, I kind of believe that, people don't buy products from people that they don't buy into. Although, as I think about it right now, and you just mentioned that, there is the case of Tesla. And I got to believe that a lot of people are buying Teslas. I don't believe in Elon Musk. That is a contradiction to my theory. So what the hell do I know? Maybe I'm completely wrong. I personally would never buy a Tesla because of Elon Musk.
Yeah. And also, I think that your life experiences were shaped deeply by those years at Apple. And, when you look back on it, it was actually a relatively short period of your life, right?
Yeah. Well, when you're 71, every period is a short period of your life.
Yeah. But I mean, you keep referencing, right? Go back to those days. I mean, you kind of stumbled into that job, right? I mean, you have to wonder if you hadn't kind of stumbled into that job, would you have wound up taking the same trajectory?
Yeah, you're being too kind. Stumbled is vague. I lucked into that job, and I lucked into that job because of nepotism. So I fell in love with computers, but I was, fundamentally a psych major, worked in the jewelry business. But my best friend in college, a guy named Mike Boych, was the first software evangelist for the Macintosh Division. So the way I got into the Macintosh Division is 100% nepotism. So I am a big believer in nepotism ever since then. And yeah, that's the arc of my, earning days.
But it seems like the reason why you became such a good evangelist for the Macintosh is that you yourself were enchanted by it,
Oh, very
right? I mean,
much.
it kind of blew you away when you first encountered it.
Yeah, well, for your listeners out there who are young, there was a time where the state of the art in typing, for example, was an IBM Selectric typewriter. And if you were really, really cool, you had an IBM Selectric typewriter that had the white tape that you could backspace, type on an error, the tape would lift off the error, and then you could type what you wanted to type correctly. And so if you come from a typewriter with a piece of white tape lifting off your errors, and then you see on an Apple II a word processor, you can backspace, you can change this, you can add paragraphs, you can do anything you want at any time without using any tape. Is like mind-boggling, yeah.
When you read some of these words of wisdom in your books, they're very succinct. I mean, it's like Confucius, right? So, sometimes you're wondering, how do I reconcile these? And, you're clearly someone who encourages people to be authentic and vulnerable. But then there's also a little bit of kind of fake it till you make it in there. I mean, you were authentic when you were endorsing the Macintosh
Yes.
products, but you were kind of like faking it as you went along, in terms of your belief in your own career and so forth.
Well, I mean, listen, Macintosh, I truly did believe in Macintosh. When I saw Mac Paint and Mac Write for the first time, it was mind-boggling. The scales were removed from my eyes. The angels started singing in heaven, and so it was really a religious experience. Now, having said that, to make Macintosh successful, there were definitely instances where we were faking it before we made it. So, one glaring example is that early in the process, we were able to convince the accounting company Pete Marwick to use Macintosh for its on-site auditing. And whenever the press would ask us, so, can you give us any example of a large organization that's using Macintosh? Not just mom and pop shops, not just schools, but like, Fortune 500, big company. And we would say, well, for example, Pete Marwick. Well, the truth is, it was only Pete Marwick that was the only example. So this tension between authenticity and fake it until you make it, it is an example that, when you, I would say that intelligent people can hold two conflicting ideas in their brain. It's not all authentic or it's not all fake. You can hold two ideas that conflict with each other in your brain and survive.
Yeah. Well, speaking of conflicting ideas, I was describing to a friend of mine this morning about, your work. And I said, he is someone who believes that you should always be generous, right? You should always be giving, right? Give everyone the benefit of the doubt, trust people and so forth. And so she said, well, he must get taken advantage of all the time. And then I remembered that you also had, your son wrote this little thing about how you told him, to watch out for that. So how do you balance those things?
Well, again, perfect example of two conflicting thoughts. I will tell you that I don't know if I have the exact statistics, but I will say that very few people have taken advantage of me in my career. And I bet you that people have taken advantage of me in my career as little or equal to people who actively resist people taking advantage of them. So at the end of the day, whether you resist or not, it's going to happen the same amount of time. So why not resist? It takes a lot less energy. Now, when you resist everybody, when you default to no, it's a lot of dead ends because there is no going past no, right? Whereas if you say yes or maybe or not yet, there's always a path to continue. And I have found that when there's a path to continue, a lot of times what you thought you should have said no to turns out to be something good. It's very hard to predict the actual outcome of something until you actually try it.
Yeah, and in the book Enchantment, you have a chapter at the end, which is how to resist Enchantment. It
Yes.
reminded me of Bob Cialdini. I think you interviewed him. I mean, you interviewed a lot of amazing people, and many of whom I also interviewed. And, when he wrote that book, Influence, he originally wrote it in order to help people
Yeah.
defend themselves against influence, right?
Yeah, well, a lot of these tools is a double-edged sword, right? So if you were to master, and the word is master, Bob Cialdini, because Bob Cialdini is the father of influence. If you were to master all these skills, you will become someone who can influence others. Now, with that superpower, now you can do good or you can do bad. Bob Cialdini would not say he, is proposing how you can use his tools to do bad, but it can be done. It can lead to bad things. I just ask that, when you learn these kind of tools, I hope that you take the high road. And I also believe that most people who read what I write, they're not looking to take the low road. They are on the high road already.
Yeah, well, another thing, I mean, it seems like in every single picture of you that I see, you're smiling, right? I haven't been able to find, I looked everywhere. I searched the internet high and I was trying to find, can I find a picture of Guy not smiling? But, in the book, you also talk about, hey, if you really want to accomplish anything, you have to suffer. You have to struggle. You have to seek out discomfort. Do you just leave the camera at home when that happens?
No. Well, there's several ways to answer that question. First of all, I am fundamentally a happy person. I am not angry. And now, I don't know, chicken versus egg, but I have been very, very fortunate in life. Like, maybe not billionaire fortunate, although I would debate that you should measure your quote fortune by money. I have a lovely family. I have a lovely wife. We all get along. We all see each other all the time. Other than being deaf, my health is very good. I'm, in the sunset of my life. I surf almost every day. The reason why I asked you if we could do this interview an hour earlier is because I wanted to get out into the water at prime time.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, let's just be honest. From the outside looking in, what does Guy have to complain about? I got nothing to complain about. I am thankful for where I am. And a lot of it is, let's be honest, just plain dumb shit luck. It's not that I'm special or anything. I was right place, right time.
Yeah, but I mean, they say luck comes to the prepared. And I think a big theme that runs through your work is this idea of change mindset, right? And, I think you had it long before you encountered the work of Carol Dweck. And yeah, and in the book, you talk about how you took up surfing at what, age 60?
60, yeah. That's a little late.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but now you do it all the time. I mean, I thought that, I mean, I'm not yet 60, so I guess I still have some time to beat you and take up surfing.
I took up ice hockey at 44. Now, I'm from Hawaii, so, it's not like there was a lot of pond hockey in my youth. We have shave ice, but we don't have ice hockey. And I took up ice hockey at 44 to play with my kids. I took up surfing at 60 to surf with my daughter. It's kind of interesting. It just doesn't enter my brain that, Guy, you are too old to do something. Now, that is getting to be more and more realistic. I'm 71 now, right? So, I tend to take up the interests of my kids as opposed to make my kids take up my interests. So that's why I did ice hockey. That's why I did surfing.
I mean, is that manifestation of empathy in a way, right? That it seems like you get infected by the interests of others.
Well, I think that may be true, but it's only true for about 5 people in the world, which is 4 of my kids and my wife. It's not like, any Tom, Dick, or Harry comes along is into crypto. So Guy's going to join the crypto phase because he wants to be empathetic and join them. I don't care about crypto. I think crypto is like a big scam. So.
Well, you also said somewhere, pursue your interests and not your passions. I think in business school, oftentimes we hear people come in and say, find your passion, pursue your passion. What's the difference?
Well, I think that the P word is vastly oversold, and it does a disservice to people who hear it. Because when they hear people say you need to find your passion, they think, well, the way passion works is one day I'm going to wake up, I'm going to discover this person, or I'm going to discover this idea, or I'm going to discover this product or this service, and bada bing, bada bang, I'm going to fall in love with it. I'm going to dedicate my life to it. I'm going to be good at it right away. And so the bar is so high for a passion. So a lot of people saying like, oh my God, I'm 22 years old. I haven't found my passion yet. What's wrong with me? I'm an underachiever. And what I think you should do instead is that you should have your eyes open, you should have your brain open, i.e., a growth mindset. And whatever interests you, you should pursue until you can discover if you really like it. Maybe then it'll turn into a passion. But to look for passion, capital P, out the gate is doing yourself a disservice. And, when I first take up some things, it's not a passion, it's an interest. And some interests die, some interests continue, and that's okay. But don't set yourself up for failure believing that as a young person, you need to find your passion. That would be like somebody saying, you're 22 years old, you're not married yet, you got to go out there and find your passion partner. Well, why don't you just date around for a while?
But it also seems like you emphasize perhaps not just sort of self-discovery, but more like self-mastery or self-crafting, right? Creating a vision of yourself and then trying to make it happen.
I think you're giving me too much credit there. I think you're assigning to me too much intellectual and planning and, purpose driven and all that kind of stuff. Basically, my life is a story of I find these interests, I fall in love, they turn into passions, and off I go. So I fell in love with Macintosh, I fell in love with Canva, I fell in love with surfing, I fell in love with hockey, I fell in love with podcasting. There's a lot of loving in your life. Now, don't get me wrong, I also fell in love, or at least I thought I fell in love with a lot of interests before that never panned out. So I'm only mentioning the high points. I'm not mentioning the low points. That's the secret of Silicon Valley, where we throw a lot of shit up against the wall. Some of it sticks. We go up, we paint the bullseye around what's stuck, and we declare victory. We say we hit the bullseye, but you can always hit the bullseye if you paint the bullseye after you see where the arrow got stuck.
Yeah, but it seems like your decision to become a writer was more, like it's like you can't be interested in until you've already done it to some degree, right?
Yeah, And listen, my first book called The Macintosh Way, it was a cathartic experience. I was in a frustrating situation, so I wrote a book how I thought business should work. And my dad is a very good example. When I wrote The Macintosh Way, writing was an interest for me. It turned into a passion. When I first wrote The Macintosh Way in 1987, I said to myself, Guy, this is your first and last book because you have nothing else to say. And here we are, 18 books later. I have said to myself 17 times, this is the last book. And I'm writing another book right now already.
Well, maybe we can go back to that because you recommended, I think, on numerous occasions, this book by Brenda Ueland, right?
Yes.
Which basically unlocked your writing career. I mean, could you just go back to that moment?
Sure,
I think it was your wife that gave you the book. Is that right?
Yes, my wife gave me the book when I started drafting.
Why did she give you the book? Did she sense that you had this thing bottled up and you want to get it out?
I think it's true. So let's just talk about starting the process of writing. So I think that many people, they believe that in order to be a writer, you need a master's of arts in English or a PhD in English. You need to take a writing course. You need to take an online course of how to create a book. I mean, you believe you need an external reinforcement that, yeah, you now have this degree from Harvard or Stanford in creative writing. You now have taken the course. Now you are a writer. And what the book by Brenda Ullin did for me was basically say, if you want to write, which is the name of the book, if you want to write. You don't need external reinforcement. And the biggest doubt in your mind is probably not the external reinforcement. It's the lack of your own belief. So if you want to write. Now, many people listening to this are not writers, but if you put in the verb for any creative endeavor, that book works for you. So if you want to program, if you want to make movies, if you want to play a musical instrument, if you want to whatever, you don't need to go to Berkeley College of Music to become a musician. Just get your freaking guitar or piano or violin and stop playing. And so I think that book just gave me permission to not seek external permission to be a writer, and also not internal permission to be a writer. If you want to write.
I mean, do you think of The Art of the Start as sort of a sequel to that? Because, I mean, even though it's ostensibly about doing startups, I mean, it's also, if you want to start being a writer, I mean, you have to overcome the same kinds of obstacles, right?
Yeah, and self-doubt. Self-doubt is the problem. Now, don't get me wrong, right? I can't tell you that if you read, if you want to write, or you master your self-doubt, that will mean you'll be successful. Because if it were that easy, there would be many more successful people. But you're never going to be a successful person if you don't try. So you at least, to use a baseball analogy, you're never going to hit a home run if you're not at bat. You got to be at bat.
And what's the relationship, I mean, do you think, between your speaking and your books? I mean, it seems like a lot of people now write books just so that they can do speaking, and nobody reads the books. They just sort of, carry them around and show them and so forth.
Yeah, so let me be honest here. So I wrote the Macintosh Way. And to my utter amazement, companies started contacting me to be their speaker about the Macintosh Way. And this is something I was not aware of, this phenomenon. So the first time it happened, I said, well, let's just pick a number. So I said, all right, it's $5,000 for me to come speak. And they said, okay. I said, well, what the hell? What? Pretty soon the speaking fees exceed the advance. I said, man, this is a way to make a living. So there is that. Now, I think that many people write a book for two reasons. One is the money, obviously, of the speech and the advance. But I think even more compelling for many people is they believe that by writing a book, it positions them as the thought leader, it positions them as a visionary, it positions them as an expert, which could lead to more speeches and consulting. And I fundamentally disagree with that theory. I think that you should write a book when you have something to say, which is very different than your personal coach is telling you, what you ought to do is write a book to help you build credibility. That doesn't mean you have something to say. It means that you're using a book as a means to an end. And I believe that a book is an end in and of itself. So you would write that book even if nobody read it, because you have something to say and you want to put it down on paper or, on Kindle. So I think that the motivation for most people to write a book is really, it's insipid, it's shallow, it's almost destructive. As a podcaster myself, we get pitched about 10 times a day to put authors on our podcast. And I got to tell you that 10 times a day, I would say 9 out of the 10 times, it's Joe Blow. And Joe Blow has a consulting company called Blow, The Blow Away. And he has written a book called The Blow Away, and it's published by Blow Press. And now Joe Blow of the Blow Away Press with the Blow Away book wants to be on my podcast because he wants to reach my audience, because he believes that he's the thought leader and the visionary. He's trying to get more consulting and more speaking fees. And I reject 9 of those a day. We get about, I think, 2,500 or 3,000 requests to be on my podcast. We put about 50 a year. The odds of getting on my podcast are about 1 out of 50. So I tell people that it's easier to get into Stanford or Harvard than it is to get on my podcast. And I passionately dislike people who are trying to use a book as a way to position themselves. I think a book is a piece of art in and of itself.
Well, maybe you can talk about your podcast guest selection criteria, because I mean, it's a pretty eclectic group. I mean, a lot of the people are academics, right? The kind of academics that I typically have on my podcast. But then you have, business leaders and people who have made social impact. For me, what happens is I typically will read the book, or I'm aware of the book, and then I seek them out, and I generally ignore most of the incoming email like you do. But how do you decide?
Well, the name of the podcast is Remarkable People, which is different than saying rich people or famous people, right? So to my knowledge, I have never had a private equity fund guy on my podcast. I don't care if he's worth $10 trillion. So it's about...
You had venture capitalists, though. Mike Maples, I saw.
I have had
too.
Mike Maples. I would...
Reid Hoffman is a VC now, right? So he counts.
Yeah, well, but Reid Hoffman, I didn't take him because he is a VC. I would say the VCs who would qualify for my podcast are Mike Moritz. If I had one VC, it would be Mike Moritz from Sequoia. Maybe John Doerr from Kleiner Perkins. So anyway, so it's about being remarkable. Now, remarkable does not mean rich or famous, although you can be rich or famous and remarkable. But it's really about the impact you've made on the world. And I don't mean you have to sell 300 million iPhones or 300 million computers. It's really, what have you done? And you could have changed just one person's life, but if you did it remarkably, I think you qualify for my podcast. And I'm all for the underdog. I think about 60% of my guests are women. I guess I'm telling you, I have a woke podcast, and I'm proud of that.
Well, I mean, it seems like, based on the book, what you've done now, kind of looking back, is you selected them primarily based on, I guess, they came to your attention based on their impact. But at the end of the day, what you're trying to find is some common, characteristics or traits of them as people, which enable them to be remarkable.
Well, honestly, that is not true, because when I make the selection, I don't know if that's true. And I have never invited somebody and recorded them and not used the episode. So it is not that well thought out. We make a pretty fast decision. And when you get 10 a day, you don't spend an hour thinking about each one. I'll give you an example of someone that I just had on. Well, she's not on yet. We just recorded her episode. Her name is Renee Fluker. She's from Detroit, Michigan. And she started a program called Midnight Golf. And Midnight Golf is, obviously, there's some golf there, but it is really to help Black youth in Metro Detroit get to college, with peer-to-peer counseling, with mentors, playing some golf, practicing some golf, getting, real food at night. And she has impacted, all these Detroit youth. Now, you probably never heard of her. She's not a private assets, private equity kind of person, not a VC, not a tech bro, not a CEO, nothing, But I consider that absolutely remarkable, more remarkable than a lot of rich people.
Yeah, but I guess I was saying is there are people that make an impact that wouldn't make the cut, presumably because of who they are. I mean, there's something in the book, Remarkable People. I think you're trying to tease out what it is about them that makes them remarkable. What is it about their personality? What is it about their motivations? What is it about them as human beings which enables them to make this impact?
Yeah, well, I mean, I hope I do more than tease it out. I hope I pull it out. But, I've noticed that remarkable people have three general qualities. First of all, they have growth mindset of Carol Dweck. If you have a growth mindset, you better back that up with a grit mindset of Angela Duckworth, because if you have a growth mindset, you're going to try things like surfing and hockey that you're not good at for years. So you need to persevere and have grit. And then the final thing you need is a grace mindset. So it's growth, grit, grace. I love tricolons and I love alliteration. So when I can have a tricolon alliteration with the first two letters of three words, man, I'm so happy. So maybe,
I actually think you mentioned that in going back to Enchantment. I think that was one of the things in that book.
well, this is the reason why I love AI so much, because it helps you. When you say, I need a tricolon, they all need to start with the same letter and they have to do it something like this. And, bada bing, bada bang, Chat GPT can say, well, there's growth, grit, grace, and it's like so much easier to come up with tricolon alliterations. And of course, the next version of Think Remarkable will be growth, grit, and grave when I die. So that's another GR word. Yeah. I got it all planned out.
Yeah. But I mean, I think also in these books, as they become more memoir-like, they start to show some growth in you, right? Like you say you've always been happy, you've always been this kind of person, but it seems like you're actually, I think you perceive yourself as getting better, right? And learning, right? How to be a person. And you tell some great stories about, incidents that happened that you learned from, and, ideally someone reads the book and they don't have to make the same mistakes.
Absolutely. And, I hope that that's my legacy. When I die, I want people to say that I helped them make the world a better place. I help them with my podcasting, my writing, my speaking, my advising, my investing. That's what I want to be remembered for, that I helped other people help themselves and help make the world a better place. I don't want to be remembered for, making crypto successful or ensuring that the long-term capital gains tax is as low as possible. Those things mean nothing to me. I want people to say I helped them grow.
Well, look, one thing you've never done, or it seems as far as I know, is you haven't been a teacher. And, you thank your teachers in the books. And you talk about the importance of teachers. I don't think Stanford hasn't had you back and UCLA hasn't had you back to teach a course, have they?
They haven't had me back to teach a course. So I don't think I could teach a course there. It's not easy teaching a course. But, funny you should mention that, because I'm in Hawaii right now, and one of my kids goes to the University of Hawaii. So I told the University of Hawaii that, I'm in the last stage of my life. I'm in the, grace stage. I'm in the return stage. So I love Hawaii. I was born and raised in Hawaii. My son is in Hawaii. I have a lot of reasons to be in Hawaii now. So if you want me to help the University of Hawaii, I'll be glad to do it. So the University of Hawaii sends out an email to its staff and professors, and they say, Guy Kawasaki is willing to talk to your classes and, come in and meet your students. And 120 of them requested me. So I have done 8 so far. I have 112 more to go. So, yeah. So I may not be a professor at the University of Hawaii, but I got a lot of students.
Yeah. Well, no, but the reason why I ask you is, for those of us who are in the business of teaching, particularly in business school and engineering schools, right? I mean, are we doing the right things? I mean, we're teaching people how to do stuff, teaching them how to make money, teaching them how to start businesses. I mean, do we need to spend more time focused on character and on personal characteristics?
I mean, it's hard not to conclude that. Right? I mean, if you look at what's happening in the world, how can you say, well, we don't need to worry about morality and ethics and, conflicts of interest. Everything is good. Everybody's moral compass is pointing to true north and all that. So, yeah, I think it's true. One of the issues I think in business school, especially, is that there is a conveyor belt to management consulting, right? So if you're in a business school, the management consultants are recruiting, they're paying more than other people. They're saying that this is the way to become, an entrepreneur, a leader, or whatever. And they take you straight out of business school and they put you into management consulting, where at the age of 25 or 26, now you're telling 50, 60-year-old managers what to do based on your 2 years of study. That would be like being a midwife without ever having a child. I don't agree with this emphasis on management consulting as the first step in your career.
Yeah. But also, I think the education has become much more about, at least explicitly, getting you ready for the job market and stuff. And it seems like, maybe the best way to get you ready for the job market is to not focus on the job market as much. I mean, you kind of had a bunch of circuitous developments happen in your life, right? I mean, you didn't set off to be an evangelist, and you did this time as a jeweler. I think you at some point were thinking about medicine and had a encounter with some blood and gore that set you on a different track.
I don't know if there was a lot of blood and gore, but it certainly wasn't a straight and, direct path. I started off in the jewelry manufacturing business, schlepping diamonds and gold and, making hand-to-hand combat sales. But I really think that helped me a lot for the rest of my career, because in my humble opinion, there are only two really fundamental roles in business. Somebody's got to make it and somebody's got to sell it. Everything else is, it's easy. You can hire people. But if you don't have a Wozniak to make it and a job to sell it, a jobs, plural, a jobs to sell it, then you got nothing. So, and so I'm not an engineer, so I got to do the other thing, which is sell.
Well, it's funny because I think in business schools, we don't really teach either one of those. I mean, you had this great story about when you were the evangelist, they were sending you out to people's houses to like do tech repair. I mean, really?
Well,
that's crazy.
I would say that is not a complete analysis of what happened. So if you want to hear the whole story, I'll tell you the whole story. So there was a woman named Sandra Kurtzig, and she was really maybe the first megastar Silicon Valley woman. She started a software company called Ask, and it was manufacturing software. So Sandra Kurtzig was extremely successful, extremely visible, and she used the Macintosh. And come to find out, she was having problems with her Macintosh. So Guy was sent to help her fix her Macintosh. And so it wasn't like, it was a random person sitting at home and, Guy's going out door to door like a evangelical or something like that on his bike with his tie. I mean, she was definitely a VIP. Although,
you're the Geek Squad.
Yeah, I was the Geek Squad before there was a Geek Squad. But if you want to hear the funniest part of this story, so I as a Macintosh user, I use Quicken to manage my checkbook. So I knew exactly how Quicken works. And come to find out, she used Quicken too, right? So she takes me into her house and she points me to her computer and she wakes up her computer and the front window is Quicken.
Okay, so you didn't open it because that would, the statute of limitations is passed. But
I did not open it. It was open. It was open front and center on this huge monitor. Now, because I knew Quicken very well, I knew exactly where the current balance of your checkbook is in the lower right corner. So what can I say? I am convicted. That's the first place I looked. And the balance in her checking account was like $250,000. And I said to myself finally, so the rich people are different from you and I because in their checking account, as opposed to their money market account or as opposed to their stock market account, in their freaking checking account where you have $500, guy, she has $250,000. And I looked at that, I said, that is something to aspire to. And
Right.
years later, I wanted to tell this story. I felt a little bit uncomfortable while telling this story in my books. And so I asked her, and she said no. And then she mentioned it to her son, and her son said, Mom, just let him tell the story. That is a great story. So that's how the story got in my book.
But you also went out and met with user groups, right? I mean, that's going out in the field. People talk about, managing by walking around. I mean,
Yeah.
you can get kind of removed from your customer, right? Removed from your employee if you're kind of hanging out in the kind of executive office, right?
Yeah. I mean, the classic tale of this is that the executives of General Motors, they get a new car every year. When they come to work, they pull up, a valet takes the car away, the car is washed, the car is serviced, a year later they get a new car. Is it any wonder that GM cars there for a while, like, they weren't such great cars because the executives never had to experience repair and maintenance and all. They just drive up, give it to the valet,
Yeah.
pick it up at the end of the day, drive home a year later, new car. What would they know about how it is to really own a car? Well, the user groups is one of the, I think, unsung heroes of Apple because the user groups represented people who loved the Macintosh. And so these people, they were alone Macintosh lovers in an MS-DOS and Windows world. So they were isolated and they were often criticized and, victims, blah, blah, blah. And of course, they were true believers in Macintosh, as I was. So it was true believers helping true believers. And they did it without money. They did it without reward. It's not because they had Apple stock or Apple income. Apple never paid for these user groups. They just believed. Now, Harley Davidson has the Hog Group, and, car marquees have the Audi Club or the Porsche Club. It's very similar to that.
I mean, do you have a guy group, like a personal board of directors who is unafraid to tell you, your flaws and failings and opportunities for improvement?
Well, I would say the chairman of that board group is my wife. How's that? That's all I really need.
Right. So she's not going to miss an opportunity to let you know if there's an opportunity for improvement.
I have my personal moral compass and I have my wife's moral compass. It takes two compasses for me.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of the other things that you talk about is curiosity, right? And I think curiosity is kind of a superpower. And I've done a lot of podcasts on curiosity, and as someone who's always curious, asking why, I can't understand why it needs to be kind of encouraged. A lot of the things that you talk about, they seem, it's kind of confused to people who have these characteristics, kind of puzzling, why you have to actually advocate for them.
That is a very interesting question. Well, to be curious, first of all, you have to have your eyes and ears and mind open, right? I mean, if it's all of those things are closed, you're not going to be curious because there's no data entertaining. And I am a very curious person. I don't know how I got it. I mean, maybe it's just in my DNA, but I love to figure things out. And, like if you look at my hobbies, let's take surfing, for example. When you start surfing, you got to figure out, let's just focus on the surfboard for a second. There's lots of things in surfing to figure out, but just the surfboard. So you got to figure out long board, short board, how thick is it? How wide is it? What's the outline shape of it? What's it made out of? And you have to be curious. And that's one of the reasons why I love AI so much, because at some point, your friends are going to get tired of answering all your questions, but ChatGPT can answer all your questions. And now, obviously, it can hallucinate, but my friends can hallucinate too. So, at a very good tactical example is, I go to ChatGPT and I say, I got this particular surfboard. It's 9 feet 10 inches long, made by Donald Takayama. It's called In the Pink. There's this box for the center fin. There's a box for 2 side fins. Tell me the fin configuration to catch the most waves. And ChatGPT answers. And, you need to have that kind of curiosity. If anything, I have too much of that.
Well, I mean, in some of the books you talk about the difficulty you encounter when you're trying to convince people of things. And this takes us back to this idea of sales. No business school, a top business school actually even has a typical sales class or sales program. Yeah,
Seriously?
no, I think in business schools, it's all about marketing, right? So if you get your marketing right, then you don't need to do sales. I mean, there'll be
I
stuff
wish
about
that was
how,
true.
right? So, I mean, why do you think sales kind of has a bad rap? Either at the intellectual level, people kind of look down on it, but also kind of on the moral level, people think of it as,
Well,
insincere or, manipulative.
I think that is a magnificent disconnect, because maybe a lot of it is definitional, because people may define sales as, somebody forcing you to buy something that's not good for you. And, they're
Right.
like spam phone calls or spam email, and, they consider that sales. On the other hand, I believe that sales is a very necessary and important skill. I would say that maybe evangelism is the purest form of sales. The difference between evangelism and most sales is evangelism, you have the other person's best interests at heart, not just yours. So when people were using Macintoshes, don't get me wrong, it was good for Guy, but I truly do believe that I was helping them be more productive and creative. And that's why I could never go to work for Microsoft, because I would not believe that Windows was making you more creative and productive. So I couldn't sell Windows, but I could evangelize Macintosh. And I would say the same thing is true of Canva, that I truly do believe when I tell people to use Canva, it is going to make them a better communicator. It's going to help them democratize design. It's good for me, but it's good for them. So, you should be so lucky that you can sell a product that you truly do believe makes other people's lives better. Now, at some point, you have to really have a realistic point of view that, if you're out there telling people to take these vitamins and supplements, and, in your mind, you've convinced yourself that this multi-level marketing program is giving vitamins and supplements to people that are making their lives better, so I'm doing them a favor. There is some of that, but I would say I was very confident that telling people to use Macintosh and Canva was good for them as well as it was good for me.
Well, maybe talk about this role of the evangelist, because I mean, you now have the same role at a different company, but most companies don't have evangelists. And I don't know, did the evangelist position exist before, with the Mac? I mean, as far as I know, most evangelists work for religious organizations. I mean, what's the kind of status of this position?
Well, first there was Jesus, and then there was a 2,000-year gap, and then Apple brought it back. Well, so evangelism comes from a Greek word meaning bringing the good news. So what an evangelist does is bring the good news. And if you were a Christian evangelist, you brought the good news of eternal life. If you were a Macintosh evangelist, you brought the good news of creativity and productivity. If you're a Canva evangelist, you brought the good news of being a better communicator. So what an evangelist does is bring the good news. Now, to be successful as an evangelist, duh, you have to have good news. So you can't, like to take an extreme
So is that
example.
why a lot of companies don't have evangelists? Because they don't have anything,
Exactly.
no good news.
You couldn't work for a tobacco company. I am an evangelist for tobacco. Tobacco and smoking is going to give you a better life. I believe in menthol filters. I believe in tobacco. Tobacco is a great thing. That is a conflict. There is no way that is going to happen. So you got to believe, and it helps if it's also true, that what you are evangelizing makes people's lives better. That's why you cannot have an evangelist for everything. Now, this is not to say that everything has to be this wonderful thing. People can be evangelists for stuff that I don't believe in. I'm not saying that I am the arbiter of all evangelism. There are people who believe certain products make people's lives better, and they're right. I just don't know it. I'm not familiar enough with the market, so I'm not saying only God can tell you if evangelism is free or real. You can decide for yourself, but you just have to have the self-awareness to truly realize it. Yeah, what I'm evangelizing really does make people's lives better. Like I could be an evangelist for mRNA, for example, right? I truly do believe that.
Yeah.
I couldn't be an evangelist for drinking Clorox. I mean, there's some limits here.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I have no ads on my podcast because, I only want, if I'm going to have a sponsor, it's got to be something that I really believe in and really care. And so I'm not going to sell, some random beef jerky or whatever, or some DraftKings or something like that. But I mean, in the business school, I'm trying to figure out exactly what route one would take to become, say, like Chief Enchantment Officer. I mean, to some extent, the CEO is supposed to be the Chief Enchantment Officer, but, obviously, if you take marketing class, you become Chief Marketing Officer. You take finance, you become Chief Finance Officer. How do we train up the next generation of, Chief Enchantment Officers?
I wish I could tell you I knew the answer to that. Well, first of all, I am surprised. I didn't realize that there's no class in sales in MBA programs. I do not understand that. And maybe it's because the conveyor belt of consulting for MBAs is so powerful that, I don't think McKinsey lays awake at night saying, how do I make my consultants more sales oriented, right? I mean,
but at the end of the day, the ones who make partner are the ones that actually, bring in the clients, right?
Yeah.
And
they're the rainmakers, right?
Yeah. So they have to figure sales out at some point along the way.
Like I said, you got to be able to hold two conflicting thoughts in your brain. So, yeah, the people who succeed at McKinsey are the best salespeople, but we don't train people how to be salespeople. Let me think about that. I think, maybe, believe it or not, maybe AI can help people be more enchanting because AI has the opportunity to help you grow and think beyond your border. And in a sense, you have available to you the history of, the knowledge of the entire human race, 24/7 by 365, basically free from a source that has infinite patience and never goes to sleep. That's a pretty good mentor there.
Now, look, throughout your books, you reference Steve Jobs, right? Obviously, he had a big impact on your life. And I think you refer to him as sort of a mission-driven asshole. And you advocate for people being a mission-driven asshole. But, based on my knowledge of you, it's hard to see you as a mission-driven asshole. Have the asshole tendencies kind of been softened over the years?
You are putting words in my mouth. I did not advocate that you become an asshole, mission driven or
Okay.
not. I am saying that the way to look at Steve Jobs is that he is not an ego, or he was not an ego driven asshole. In my humble opinion, Steve was not working for the glorification of Steve. Steve was working for building the best computer or phone or tablet or pad or store or app store ever. I mean, that was his goal. He wanted to build the best thing, and that was his mission. So you're either part of the problem or part of the solution towards that mission. And if you were part of the problem or an obstacle to that mission, he ran you over like an asshole would. So I'm not saying that that's the only path. I mean, on the other hand, if you look at Melanie Perkins from Canva, she is mission driven, but not an asshole. So you don't have to be an asshole. Now, that's one of the dangers of, having business heroes that, it's very difficult to separate correlation from causation. So you could say to yourself, well, look at Steve Jobs. He drove a black Mercedes. He wore New Balance shoes. He wore Levi's 501s. He had a black mock turtleneck. He drove in the carpool lane in his unlicensed black Mercedes during rush hour. He parked in the handicap slots, even though he's not handicapped. So I'm going to go buy myself a black mock turtleneck and jeans and New Balance and a Mercedes and drive in the carpool lane and park in a handicap slot. And I'm going to be the next Steve Jobs. And I hate to tell you, but you're just going to be an asshole. You're not going to be Steve Jobs. So that's what you need to separate. Like, what's the difference? It's not the clothing. It's not the, those behavioral things. The thing that made Steve Jobs so freaking remarkable was that he could either create or predict the future. And I would say that the closest person alive who could do that is probably Elon Musk, but there's a lot of other things going on there.
Well, I mean, look, you talk about being honest, and you say, obviously, don't always be honest, right? But, you want to be honest, and honesty is good for your career. And you tell a great story about when you were honest with Steve Jobs. But I mean, look, if you had to sit down with Steve Jobs, he comes back from the dead and you could have a little chat with him, a one-on-one. It seems like a lot of the advice that you give to people in the books, I mean, would be to, not always be so Steve Jobs like. I mean, would there things that you would tell him, like, now that you can't fire you, could you say like, hey, maybe you ought to be a little more of this and a little bit less of that, or would you have to take the bitter with the sweet?
Steve Jobs was truly remarkable, but I cannot help but wonder, like, what if he was more empathetic towards employees? What if he was more supportive of employees? Now, you could make the case that Steve Jobs scared the shit out of his employees and drove us to do the best work of our career, which is probably true. There is an element of that. There's no doubt in my mind he scared the shit out of me and made me work harder. So there's that. But, imagine if it was a kinder, gentler Steve Jobs. Could he have accomplished more? I happen to think so. But, we will never know. And, who am I to criticize Steve Jobs? I'm no Steve Jobs. I mean, he's in a completely different league from me.
Well, last question. You say you're writing a new book. I mean, what's there left to say? I mean, haven't you said it all at this point?
Well, my next book is called Everybody Has Something to Hide. The subtitle is Why and How to Use Signal. So I believe that Signal, as the most secure and private messaging platform, is essential for the survival of society. So I have become...
Sponsored? Is this a sponsored book?
By Signal? No. I mean,
okay.
No.
Just checking.
I mean, Signal is a not-for-profit. And so I think, if I could do it all over again, if Signal were around way back when, I would be only on Signal today. I just love how Signal works. I love that it's not only encrypted end to end, but it retains the least amount of metadata Now, people, encryption metadata is not familiar to everybody. So I'll give you a metaphor. So, when you watch these crime movies or you read these crime novels, and there's always these guys sitting in the van and they got a wiretap on your phone and they're listening to what you say, right? So imagine if they're sitting in the van and they're listening to what you say, but what you say is all jumbled up because it's encrypted. So that's the encryption, where it jumbles up the stuff so you cannot understand it. So that's one part of Signal. The other part is the metadata. Now, the metadata is all the information about who, when, why, what time, how long, where, et cetera, et cetera. So think of the metadata as the phone records as opposed to the actual conversation. Now, when you read all these crime novels and crime movies, you always see that they not only wiretap the perpetrator, but they also get the phone records, because with the phone records, they say, hey, you called this person called you back, you called them back, you called them back. And then the murder occurred 15 minutes after these 5 cell phone calls between the two of you. AT&T and Verizon can tell you that those calls happened, how long they lasted, et cetera, but they cannot tell you the content. But with that kind of metadata, it can build the case that you killed the person, you did the drug heist, whatever, you broke into the Louvre, whatever. But Signal only retains 3 things from the metadata, as opposed to Meta, Facebook, and Apple, and Google. So Signal only retains when did you open up your account, what is your phone number, and when is the last time you used it. And think about that. Think about that if you're in court and you say, well, I have some proof that supports that this is the criminal. He opened up his Signal account in 2021, August 10th. His number is 202-555-1212. And the last time he used his Signal account was yesterday at 8 a.m. How does that help my case for a murder that happened 6 months ago? So anyway, this is a long explanation of why I think Signal is so important.
Well, you're not planning on committing any crimes, I hope.
Well, okay, so that is a very good and astute observation, because, I've been discussing this in terms of crime, but the reason why the book is called Everybody Has Something to Hide is because I believe everybody has something to hide. You and I, Greg, we have stuff to hide. Like, I don't know about you, but, if you have kids, I am passing my password and getting their password and account information back and forth all the time. I'm signing in as them, they're signing in as me. We're doing that with text right now. That's not too smart. And if you were an activist, imagine if you were an activist today and you're trying to schedule a demonstration, or you're going through, sexual identity issues. Man, you want that stuff to be as private as possible at this point. So I think everybody, I'll give you one more example. So let's suppose that you are going through a messy divorce, and one day you are drunk and you text your divorce lawyer. She is going to get our kids over my dead body or hers, right? Like, imagine if you texted that when you were drunk, which is, that's not too far out of reality, right? So yeah, over my dead body or hers, she's going to get custody of the kids. That might not be such a good thing in court for when you fight for custody and say, yeah, I'm the responsible parent, I should have the kids. Oh, sir, but on this day you said over your dead body or hers, you're going to get the kids. Is that the kind of parent you're going to be? I mean, these are the kinds of things you need to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. One hopes that we will adapt.
That's a good way to end this podcast.
Yeah. Well, Guy, thanks so much for joining me. Look, there's a lot of great books here, some of which hopefully they're all still in print, because they're really fantastic and haven't aged at all. So we got like Enchantment and Art of the Start, and Wiser Guys, the new one. So check this out. Thanks a lot, and enjoy your day on the water.
Oh yeah, I will. Thank you very much, Greg. All the best to you.
unSILOed podcast is produced by University FM, elevating the stories of your institution.